Have you ever wondered how a simple cardboard box ordered online could trigger a billion-dollar logistics problem on the other side of the world? And why the United States, one of the richest countries on Earth, ends up scrapping perfectly usable steel shipping containers that just arrived from China? It sounds wasteful, almost absurd. But this quiet reality plays out in ports across America every single year, and it directly affects the price you pay for everyday goods, the availability of products in stores, and even the stability of global trade. Here's the shocking part. For every container ship that arrives in the United States packed with televisions, furniture, clothing, electronics, and machinery, a significant portion of those containers never return to Asia filled with American exports. Instead, many sit idle, get repurposed domestically, or are eventually sold off and scrapped. But why would a country discard massive steel boxes that cost thousands of dollars to manufacture? To understand this, we need to step back and look at how global trade evolved. Standardized shipping containers became the backbone of international commerce in the mid-20th century, transforming ports from chaotic loading zones into highly efficient logistics hubs. Before containers, goods were loaded piece by piece, a slow and expensive process. Once standardized steel boxes became universal, ships could move tens of thousands of containers at a time, dramatically lowering transport costs and fueling globalization. Over the decades, China emerged as the world's manufacturing powerhouse, especially after joining the World Trade Organization in 2001. American companies outsourced production to Chinese factories to cut costs, and as a result, ships began flowing heavily in one direction, from China to the United States. Let's look at the data. The U.S. imports hundreds of billions of dollars, more in goods from China, each year than it exports back. That trade imbalance is not just a number on a spreadsheet, it creates a physical imbalance of containers. Every time a container arrives full of goods and is unloaded in Los Angeles, Long Beach, New York, or Savannah, that empty box must either be refilled with American exports or sent back empty. Here's where it gets interesting. The U.S. does export products like agricultural goods, chemicals, scrap materials, and machinery, but not nearly enough to match the flood of imports. So shipping companies face a decision. Do they wait around in U.S. ports hoping to fill containers with exports, or do they rush the empties back to Asia as quickly as possible to meet demand from Chinese factories that urgently need them to load more products bound for America and Europe? During periods of high demand, especially during events like the pandemic-era supply chain crunch, it became more profitable for shipping lines to send containers back empty rather than wait days or weeks for lower value American exports to be loaded. Time in global shipping equals money. A container sitting idle in an American yard represents lost revenue because that same box could be generating income on a trans-Pacific route. But wait, there's more. Not all containers are owned by shipping lines. Some are leased from container leasing companies, and others are sold into secondary markets. When trade imbalances persist year after year, the U.S. accumulates a surplus of containers. Storing them is not free. Ports charge fees, land is expensive, and maintenance costs add up. Steel containers can rust, become damaged, or fall out of compliance with international shipping standards. Once repair costs exceed the residual value of the container, scrapping becomes economically rational. In other words, the decision to throw away containers is not about carelessness. It is about cost calculations. Now the real question is, why doesn't the U.S. simply produce enough exports to fill those containers? The answer lies in structural economics. The American economy is largely driven by services, finance, technology, healthcare, entertainment, rather than heavy manufacturing. Services don't fill steel boxes. A financial consulting service cannot be loaded onto a cargo ship. Meanwhile, China's economy has long specialized in manufacturing physical goods at massive scale. This structural imbalance creates a physical artifact. Empty containers piling up in import-heavy regions. Consider the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which together handle a massive share of U.S. containerized imports. At times, satellite images have shown vast parking lots filled with empty containers, stacked like giant steel bricks. Some are quickly repositioned. Others remain longer than expected. Shipping companies often reposition containers strategically, moving them via rail to inland hubs like Chicago or Dallas, where exports such as agricultural products may be available. But if export demand is weak or freight, rates are extremely high in the opposite direction. Repositioning may not make sense. Here's an analogy to make it clearer. Imagine a taxi service that constantly drives passengers from the airport to downtown, but rarely finds passengers going back to the airport. The taxi either drives back empty or waits downtown hoping someone needs a ride. If demand is strong at the airport, the fastest way to earn money is to return immediately, even without a passenger. Containers operate under similar logic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this imbalance became even more visible. American consumers stuck at home ordered record amounts of imported goods, exercise equipment, electronics, home improvement supplies. Imports surged. At the same time, port congestion worsened. Shipping rates from China to the U.S. West Coast soared to unprecedented levels. Let's look at the numbers. At peak, spot rates for a 40-foot container skyrocketed several times above pre-pandemic levels. With such high profits per trip, shipping lines prioritize speed over balance. imbalance. They rushed empty containers back to Asia instead of allowing them to be used for lower value American exports like hay or recycled paper. Some U.S. agricultural exporters even complained publicly that they could not secure containers because shipping lines preferred empties over their cargo. This created political tension and highlighted how market incentives can override domestic export interests. But wait, there's another layer. Manufacturing of containers themselves is highly concentrated in China. Estimates have shown that the vast majority of the world's new shipping containers are produced by Chinese manufacturers. That means when older containers in the U.S. become surplus or uneconomical to return, scrapping them locally may be cheaper than shipping them back across the Pacific for reuse. Steel prices also influence decisions. If scrap steel prices are high, dismantling an aging container and selling the metal may yield immediate returns. Over time, a portion of containers in the U.S. simply age out of active international circulation and enter the domestic resale market, where they are converted into storage units, construction materials, pop-up shops, or even housing. You might have seen container homes or container offices. Many of those originated as surplus shipping containers. So while the phrase throws away sounds dramatic, the reality often involves economic reallocation rather than literal dumping in landfills. Still, the inefficiency remains significant. Let's examine the environmental dimension. Every empty repositioning voyage consumes fuel and emits greenhouse gases. When containers are manufactured in China using steel and energy, shipped to the U.S. and then scrapped rather than reused long-term, there is embedded carbon in that life cycle. Environmental economists argue that persistent trade imbalances create unnecessary transport emissions. If global trade were more balanced, container utilization rates would improve, reducing wasteful repositioning. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The imbalance is not solely about China. The U.S. runs trade deficits with multiple countries, but the scale of U.S.-China trade magnifies the container issue. Tariffs introduced in recent years aim to reduce dependency on Chinese imports, yet supply chains are complex. Some manufacturing shifted to Southeast Asia, but containers still flow heavily toward American consumers. The physical pattern remains. More boxes arrive than depart full. Now let's consider a real operational scenario. A container ship arrives in Los Angeles carrying 10,000 containers from Shanghai. After unloading, perhaps only a fraction are immediately matched with export bookings. Shipping lines analyze rate differences. If the rate from Shanghai to Los Angeles is extremely high while the return rate is relatively low, the opportunity cost of waiting becomes enormous. So they load empties back onto the ship, sometimes within days. Others are repositioned inland, but may not be used before the next demand. Spike requires them overseas again. Over months and years, surplus containers accumulate in regions where imports exceed exports. Some eventually exceed repair thresholds. According to industry practices, once a container becomes structurally compromised, floor damage, corrosion, frame distortion, it may fail safety inspections. Repairing it can cost more than its depreciated value. At that point, selling it for scrap or secondary domestic use makes financial sense. But the systemic issue persists. America consumes far more physical goods than it produces for export. This leads us to a broader structural question. Is the container surplus a symptom of deeper economic imbalance? The answer appears to be yes. The U.S. dollar's role as the world's reserve currency makes imports relatively affordable and encourages consumption. American consumers benefit from lower prices, but the side effect is a continuous inflow of goods. Meanwhile, exporting requires competitive manufacturing, infrastructure, and trade agreements. While the U.S. excels in high-value sectors like aerospace and advanced machinery, those goods often ship in specialized formats and do not offset the sheer volume of consumer imports. Let's challenge an assumption here. Some might assume that if containers are piling up, the simple solution is to force shipping companies to prioritize exports. In fact, regulators have considered and implemented measures to ensure fair access for exporters. However, shipping is a global business governed by market forces. If freight rates differ dramatically between directions, companies will naturally optimize for profit unless policy intervention alters incentives. And policy interventions can create unintended consequences, such as higher overall shipping costs. Now think about the financial math from a shipping company's perspective. Suppose it costs several $1,000s per day to keep a vessel delayed. If waiting for export cargo delays departure by even 2 days, that's significant lost revenue. Multiply that across hundreds of voyages per year, and the incentive to reposition empties becomes overwhelming. Add to that container leasing fees, demurrage charges, and yard storage costs, and you begin to see how quickly economics can override the desire for perfect balance. But there's more. Container flows are also seasonal. U.S. retailers import heavily before the holiday season. After peak season, demand for exports may not match the surplus. This cyclical mismatch intensifies storage pressures. Inland rail networks become congested with empty equipment. Ports may even limit how long empties can remain on terminals. Eventually, some containers are auctioned off. It's not that America is literally tossing them into the ocean. It's that the cost of reintegrating them into global circulation sometimes exceeds their economic value. So what are the broader implications? First, consumers indirectly directly benefit from cheaper imports made possible by this system. Second, exporters sometimes face disadvantages due to equipment shortages. Third, environmental costs accumulate from inefficient flows. And fourth, the visual image of surplus containers highlights how global trade is not a perfectly balanced exchange, but a directional pipeline, shaped by comparative advantage and consumer demand. Now, the real question is, could this change? There are several possibilities. If U.S. manufacturing grows, especially in sectors that produce exportable goods in large volumes, container utilization would improve. If trade becomes more regionally balanced, with nearshoring to countries closer to U.S. markets, shipping distances and imbalances may decrease. Technological improvements in tracking and logistics could optimize container repositioning. Some companies are experimenting with foldable containers to reduce empty repositioning space. Others use predictive analytics to better match supply and demand. But structural trade imbalances are rooted in economic fundamentals, not simple logistics errors. So when you hear that America throws away shipping containers from China, the reality is less dramatic but more revealing. It is a visible symbol of a global system where production and consumption are geographically separated. It reflects a country that consumes vast quantities of physical goods while exporting more intangible value. It demonstrates how shipping economics prioritize speed and profitability, and it exposes how market incentives can create physical inefficiencies that seem irrational on the surface but are logical within a profit framework. As we conclude, consider this. Every product you order online likely traveled thousands of miles inside a steel container. That container's journey did not end when your package arrived. It became part of a complex decision tree involving rates, storage costs, repair expenses, trade imbalances, and environmental trade-offs. Some containers will make dozens of round trips across oceans. Others will be repurposed into storage units or homes. A few will be dismantled and melted down. The next time you see a stack of steel boxes near a port or rail yard, you are not just looking at shipping equipment. You are looking at the physical footprint of global trade patterns. The key takeaway is not outrage, but understanding. Trade imbalances create container imbalances. Market incentives drive repositioning decisions, and economic structure shapes physical logistics. If America wants fewer surplus containers, it would require deeper shifts in production, consumption, and export competitiveness. Until then, the cycle continues. Ships arrive full, depart partially empty, and the silent steel boxes tell the story of a global economy that moves unevenly, driven by demand, profit, and the relentless flow of goods across oceans.